So this video isn't intended to be a detailed guide on how I went about making one of these. It's instead more like a documentation on the overall process. And I didn't start off with a solid block of wood. I instead ordered a maple body off of eBay since I did not want to cut it myself because that would be very time consuming. And to start off, I drilled some holes to add some LEDs and details later on. Now here you see me spraying some primer onto the guitar body, and I will make a note that it is very important to do this in a well ventilated area, or better yet outside, and to wear the proper safety equipment such as a mask or protective glasses. I also realized that I made a mistake and needed to go back and Dremel in an indent for the LED lights that will be surrounding the edge of the body. Once again, very important to wear proper equipment when doing this because there's a lot of dust flying around and you really don't want to breathe that stuff in. For this video, I didn't record myself spraying on the rest of the primer, but it's important to note that you should be using the full can in order to lay on a sufficient layer. Here I used a wet sandpaper to smooth out any bumps or drips from the primer. I believe I was using a 300 or 400 grit sandpaper, but as long as you're able to smooth it out without taking off too much, then you should be good. For the spray paint, I used a lacquer based metallic red, and it's very important to spray it at least a foot away from whatever you're spraying in order to avoid drips. Just to reiterate, you're dealing with tiny droplets that can get into your eyes, so remember to shield them. After using up 2 cans of the base color, I sprayed about half a can of a sparkly metallic red, and you can see here that I did have quite a few drips, but it's not too noticeable, especially since it's going to be on the back. I also recolored a neck that I ordered since the original was a little off. As an aside, certain lacquer colors such as black tend to be very runny, so they might bleed through whatever materials you're trying to use to create a pattern. Even so, I was still able to get decent circles, so overall I was fairly satisfied with how it worked out. Here's a quick overview on the progression of the spray painting, and as you might notice, the end result is a little different from the in-between, and that's primarily because of the specific color that the sparkle red is. Still, lacquer-based paints fuse together, so it's important to establish those previous layers. And once again, a demonstration on how the black lacquer bleeds through thin materials. Regardless, I kinda just went for it here, and I was a little disappointed on how it turned out, but it wasn't too terrible. So before this step, I sprayed several layers of clear top coat, and I didn't record any of that because of how thin the spray was. It was pretty much an aerosol, and I didn't want to get any of it on my camera equipment. Once I got enough layers on though, I got to work on applying wet sandpaper to almost every surface. As I apply the sandpaper, you might begin to notice that the shine on the surface begins to disappear, and that's mostly because of how all the micro bumps are getting sanded down. The grit of the sandpaper that I start off with is 1000 grit, then I move up to 1500 grit, and then finally 2000 grit, and that will be applied on every external surface. While I'm doing this, I'm keeping a very close eye on whether or not I happen to take off any of the color. If I do, then that just means I'm going to have to apply more clear top coat. Now, as you guys watch me sand away at this thing, I will address that yes, this is for a cosplay idea. I'm not going to say what it is just yet. I did leave a few hints throughout the video on what it's inspired by, but I think I'll save it for the end and let you guys guess what it's based on. And this step here is me applying the rubbing compound, just making sure to really work it into the top coat. So after applying the rubbing compound, I applied some show car glaze in a similar manner. They're both essentially just compounds that people use in car shows to make the cars all glossy and shiny. And after several hours of recording, the SD card in my camera finally ran out, so that explains the sudden jump cut. As much as I would have liked for you guys to see the transition between the dull color and the glossy surface, you can still see the difference it makes when you put in the time to really sand it down and then apply the glaze. Also, these little panels were laser cut out, and they're another hit at what this is inspired by. For the battery pack, I went with some high capacity, high voltage 18650 batteries, and as for putting them together, I used a product designed by Ruzend. They basically click into place just like Legos. An important thing to know about these batteries is because they have such a high volt and high amp output that any thin wires connecting both the positive and negative ends together will have such a high resistance that it'll essentially burn up. I actually ended up burning myself a little bit on one of my fingers when I actually had them touching. Here I'm setting in the nickel plates to connect the batteries in series and parallel, and it's very important to do this correctly. Otherwise, you might cause a short within the batteries themselves, and that's really not good. It'll cause the batteries to heat up, cause the nickel plates to heat up and spark, and it could even melt the Ruzend connections. Once I had them connected up and I was pretty sure I didn't have a small bomb on my hands, I used a voltmeter to check the voltages just to make sure I have everything correct. So at this stage, I then installed a battery management system, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on the connections and what it's all about, since there are a lot of online resources, and I do believe it's important to do your own research. After it's all done, I ended up with something that'll probably get me in trouble with TSA. A few important features with the battery pack include a charging port, an on-off switch for the output power, and a long enough set of wires for the output power. Also, I added an on-off switch for the LED battery capacity display. This is mostly just to preserve battery life and not have it on all the time. Once I was confident that the battery pack was good to go, I connected that up to the amplifier inlaid into the back of the guitar, and then connected that to this speaker that is set into the guitar body as well. I didn't record myself installing the LEDs because that was very tedious. If you wanted to do it yourself, it's fairly simple as long as you do it in a well-ventilated area, since there are some health concerns with soldering. I'll try to leave a link in the description on the Arduino sketch that I used, but overall it's about 99% done with just a few finishing touches left. So I'm just gonna go ahead and let you guys enjoy the end result. So if you guys haven't guessed yet, the inspiration for this cosplay came from a single image from a song on YouTube called Guitar Mass, specifically Megadine Luca. I just thought the image looked really sick, and so I got inspired to try and make something similar to it. Either way, the guitar prop itself took about 5 months to complete, and that's primarily because I had zero experience on how to actually do any of the steps before I actually did them. But that should be more of a testament on how you shouldn't be afraid to try something just because you have no experience in how to do it. Up next, I'm probably going to have to make the outfit, which I have no idea how I'm going to do, so hopefully that doesn't turn out horrible. Anyway, I'm still relatively new to making videos and editing, so make sure to subscribe if you guys want to see more crazy projects like this, or even smaller projects in the future. See ya!
Fuck.